So when it does come to, people having the conversation of conception, what are the common misconceptions that you often hear about in your practice?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, one of the first things I really like to help educate patients on, for our female patients, is just their actual cycle, like what is happening in their menstrual cycle. Because, even though, we go through health class, most of it is always just focused on how do we avoid getting pregnant, right? Like, how do we stop that from happening? Outside of that, a lot of women have no idea what's happening in their reproductive system, right? And so it's like we spend our teens, our 20s, just avoiding getting pregnant as much. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I'm ready to have a baby. And I have really no idea how to do that.
Right.
So, it's having that first conversation of, how do we track our cycle? What does ovulation look like? Are you actually ovulating? Because obviously if you're not ovulating, pregnancy is going to be very challenging, right? So sometimes it's just a matter of changing, when couples are having intercourse, and then they can get pregnant, right? Like that's obviously a pretty simple solution, but not something that should be overlooked, right? Then, other misnomers are, things like, oh, my lifestyle has nothing to do with me being able to get pregnant. I can keep drinking until I know I'm pregnant, or, once I get pregnant, then I'll stop smoking, or, whatever the case is. Those, toxins coming into the body play a huge role in the health of both sperm and egg. So this is not just a female comment, right? So that's also something I often will find, one partner is very committed to, making lifestyle changes and doing everything they can to get healthy. And the other partner is, still going out drinking regularly, smoking, using marijuana, not changing their diet. And that's going to play a big role in the health of both the egg and the sperm. And, often we'll see that kind of trend more to the male partner, but we can see it the other way. And then, in same-sex relationships, obviously that's a little bit different. But even there, when I'm working with, say I have two females and only one is looking to get pregnant, obviously, I still will encourage both to, make the lifestyle changes, commit to it together. So then they're still getting that bonding, they're still getting that together time, which I think is really important.
Yeah, the support essentially is what it comes down to. You had mentioned things right off the top of our conversation with nutritional deficiencies as something that you want to identify quite early on. When it does come to contributing factors to possibly decrease someone's likelihood of conception, what are the things that you are often flagging in that process?
Yeah, so definitely some of our B vitamins play a big role here. So obviously most people have heard about folic acid. So folic acid is actually a synthetic version of the B9 vitamin folate. And in our bodies, basically, folate gets converted into what's called our active form of folate, which is, it's a very long word, 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate. We short form it into 5-MTHFR. But the MTHFR version of folate is the actual one that is active in, helping with DNA replication, helping ensure, so when baby first starts to develop, their nervous system develops and their neural tube develops, and that's where folic acid is so important. But there is about 20% of the population that basically has a genetic defect that doesn't allow them to take synthetic folic acid and metabolize it into that active form. So if, I'm working with patients and they're not aware of their genetic status on that particular gene, I will always recommend they supplement with active folate, or, making sure their prenatal has 5-MTHFR instead of folic acid. And this is something that I think, not everybody is aware of, and especially, when the recommendations from, their family doctor, maybe just take a folic acid, it doesn't matter which one, we're all good. Right. That's a really important conversation to have, especially for patients that have been struggling to get pregnant or having recurrent miscarriage, because that's often a genetic anomaly that we will see come up in that population base. So that's one that's really important. Making sure their B12 is in a good range is also really important. Now, the range when you run blood work is quite wide on B12. And again, when we talk about B12, it's really important for that DNA replication. So where that's relevant is basically, as your egg develops, you need it to replicate in a healthy way. And if it doesn't, that's when you can have basically anomalies in a potential embryo and end up not being able to conceive. So with B12, again, there can be, more active forms. Methylcobalamin is typically the form that we'll look at when we're looking at our prenatal to make sure that it's going to be absorbed and utilized well. Also, there's been a big trend dietary-wise towards more vegan and vegetarian eating. And we know if you are eating that style, you're not getting B12 in your diet. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be particularly important for those patients that have chosen, to eat either a vegan or vegetarian diet. Iron is another big one when it comes more to the female side. If you're deficient in iron, it basically, essentially your body can give messaging that, you're not able to carry a healthy pregnancy, so then you don't get pregnant. Mm-hmm. So making sure that, iron is in a good range is really important. And again, for our vegan and vegetarian patients, it can be more challenging to get enough iron in their diet. So it is something they really have to focus on up-leveling and making sure they're getting enough nutrients into the diet, because the vegetarian sources don't absorb quite as easily as our animal-based iron sources. But even, women that are eating meat can often be deficient as well. So it is an important conversation to be having. And then probably vitamin D would be the last one that I think from a basic kind of nutrient standpoint is really important. There has been multiple studies showing, both sides, like women and men that are low in vitamin D will have a more challenging time getting pregnant and with staying or maintaining a pregnancy.
In the ideal world, if you could see a couple and be able to set them up for success, when would you like to sort of have them sitting with you, and when should they really start to be thinking about adopting a lot of, the nutritional and lifestyle practices?
Obviously as naturopaths, we would like people to do this on an ongoing basis, but when we're talking specifically about conception, typically I'd love to see patients kind of 6 months, somewhere in that kind of 3 to 6 months before they want to start trying, so we can, make sure hormones are processing and balanced well. We can optimize, again, that egg and sperm quality. It takes about 3 months from when kind of the primordial follicle, which is basically kind of the baby of your egg, before it starts to develop and ovulate. It takes about 3 months. Mm-hmm. From when a sperm first starts to develop until it ejaculates from the body, it also is about 3 months. So that 3-month window before conception is really like the most critical, I would say. But obviously, if we can start making some of those changes before we hit that 3-month window, that would be ideal for patients' overall long-term health, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what are the most common practices when it does come to nutrition and lifestyle? You mentioned sort of the alcohol side of things, fruits and veggies. What other things are you sort of, kind of putting on the table when you are talking to couples as they are on this start of the journey?
So some of it will be a little bit more individualized depending on, what's going on for a patient. If they have any reproductive concerns, say they've been diagnosed with endometriosis or polycystic ovarian syndrome, we will have different nutritional recommendations depending. But, as a kind of a general overall, if you're kind of just looking to up level your regular health, generally we look at kind of a modified Mediterranean style diet. So lots of lean protein, making sure you're getting enough protein in the diet. I find that can be quite hit and miss for patients, and making sure you're getting enough healthy fats. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously there has been over the last few years a little bit of a trend towards the ketogenic diet as well. The ketogenic diet is fairly extreme when we look at kind of taking out almost all carbohydrates. So generally, what the research shows is having a reasonable balance in your macronutrients is going to be the most optimal for conception. Now, there could be individual variation in that with patients if they have a particular health concern, but I tend to really steer people away from extreme diets and just say, okay, let's make sure we're getting, our healthy fats in, we're getting enough protein, we're getting some complex carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are not the enemy, right? We have 3 macros, we need them all. And then just really eating, whole, real food. So staying away from the packaged processed stuff as much as we can, keeping sugars, anything that we would kind of class as unhealthy. We want to try to keep those kind of lower in the diet. Now, you don't have to be neurotic and never have a treat ever. I want people to enjoy themselves as well, but I try to teach people to live kind of by the 80-20 rule. So if 80% of the time you're hitting, getting those healthy things in, the other 20% is when you perhaps have a beer on a Friday night or a glass of wine.